Hi, I'm Tom. At the end of last year, I started turning my very first 40k army into a playable force for the Horus Heresy, making a Imperialis Militia detachment for either my Imperial fists or my world leaders. Maybe even a standalone army at some point, given enough time. I got an intro video for the project as a whole, with a bit of my methodology and backstory for the project if you're interested in that. It should be in a card or linked in a description. In this video, I will be converting and painting up a reconnaissance squad for the militia force, kitbashed from various old metal and plastic catachans, Cadians, and whatever else I have in my bits box. The lore on these guys is pretty sparse, not that this is going to be a lore video, but I do have one of those coming up. With any common sense military force, real or imaginary, there will always be a need for a reconnaissance unit. These guys act as scouts, trackers, ambushers, snipers, observers. Many different roles are encapsulated in this type of unit. And for the Imperial Army or militia, it's no different. These guys either know their local terrain really well as a PDF force, or just are natural trackers, hunters, or have that sort of fieldcraft ability. Before I start building them, let us quickly look at what options they have so that I can make them as WYSIWYG as possible. The squad starts at 5 man, 4 scouts and a scout sergeant. We can add up to 4 more men, which I will be doing due to the poor morale of the unit and the army as a whole. The militia rule says that if I fail a panic test, they don't fall back, they run away. So I want to delay that morale test due to taking 25% casualties as long as I can. All of them come with a shotgun, frag grenades, and flak armor. The entire unit may exchange their shotguns for las or stub carbines. Up to 5 men can have a sniper rifle or a long las. And finally, the scout sergeant can have melter bombs. Those are pretty simple options, so let's build some scouts. First up, I don't have 10 shotguns in my bits box, so it will have to be carbines. Except for the sergeant. I got this old metal Cadian lieutenant model with a shotgun, and he will be the leader of the squad. I'm not entirely certain if I can actually keep the shotgun on this guy, but it says that the entire unit may exchange their shotguns, so I guess that he can keep it. Not that it is any better, otherwise it will just have to be some kind of strange design of las carbine, a pump action las carbine with a big heatsink. Sure, I don't think anyone would accuse a militia player of building for advantage. Speaking of carbine, let's see what options I got. The Cadian models of Lasgun, which is granted a 40k model, is what I would call a quote-unquote rifle. Not that las would have any rifling since it's laser and don't have to twist a bullet. Let's not get into that. But what a carbine is typically a more compact version of a rifle. And I think we can accomplish that by using these catachan lasguns. They don't have nearly as long a handguard, and therefore they ought to be lighter. At least they look like a shortened version. They aren't actually. I could potentially chop down the barrels a little bit to make them shorter. I actually didn't end up doing this, but I think that could have been a nice look for the squad. And if I make another one, I might do that. And then finally, we have this one with a folding stock. That is definitely a more compact version, but is intended to be sort of for tank crew and whatnot. Although it does look like the Armageddon Steel Legion ones. But for now, we'll go with these catachan ones, and I especially like this one with a bit of folded cloth on it. It does look a little bit personalized and recon-y and camouflage-ish. In my collection, I also have these 3 old metal catachan snipers, and they do have sniper rifles, not long las, so I think they will be perfect for the squad. And I will be following some of the design cues off of these metal models going forward. And then from an old Cadian command squad, I also got a long las. But except for the muzzle of the gun, it could just as well be a sniper rifle for the sake of simplicity when playing the game. Let's see what other bits I have. I think since this will be a scout recon squad, I would want them to look fairly lightly armored. I know they have flak armor. We'll have to imagine some of that, just like we have to do on any catachans, really, in 40k. But yeah, I want them to look like veterans. They don't have a veteran stat line at all, but I want them to look like sort of special operators. One thing about reconnaissance is that sometimes you can be sent behind enemy lines and can't expect resupply, so you'll have to carry everything you need. And fortunately, I got loads of backpacks here. So I think that will be a common theme for the squad. Backpack and or loads of other equipment, such as knives, drinking canteens, grenades, pouches, what have you. Machetes to clear any brush. These guys can't take close combat weapons, but I think for the sake of their role, I can model minor things on there. Before I started the squad in earnest, I made a single test model, which is a good tip whenever you do conversions. I got this guy who's looking like a bit of a veteran or a hunter, not really racing his carbine because that's not his job. The shooters in the squad will be the snipers and the other will be close support for those guys. So if they do their job right, they shouldn't be firing their rifle. And then he has a knife out, either to assassinate a sentry or to clear some brush, or open a can of food while they wait for anything to happen if they're observing a position. But let's get started with the building of the squad. A no-brainer will be the long lass that I had from the old Cadian command squad. Just using a Cadian torso for it, as I know it will fit, and at least one guy will have visible flak armor. Also just using a bit of glue to try and melt that seam in the cloak together just a little bit. Looking at the three other snipers, they all have sort of bandanas on, I guess to minimize reflection. So I find an appropriate head with a bandana and add it to this sniper. As for the basics of the squad, I will be using some Catachan bodies mostly. There will be a few that aren't. And standard assembly here. Legs onto bases, torsos onto legs, and then I find a bunch of equipment and backpacks to put on these guys. But let's try to make some cool poses with them. Here I'm using a backpack, and I have to admit I realized this very late in the process that I turned it upside down, and I did it twice. So there are some gravity defying smoke grenades later on. I just thought it looked better this way with the shovel pointing up rather than down, because if you want to sit down, that would obstruct your ability to do so. I know that it's sticking up, but it's a piece of wood, so I don't know. It was a bit of a mistake, but there we are. We have this guy with loads of pouches on his back, so I can't mount a backpack on him, but he already have a lot of storage there, and I will simply just add some more to him to bulk out his carrying capability. Here we get to some of the posing. I am grabbing a design cue off of one of the metal miniatures. The lieutenant has a soft cap on his head, and on his back he has his helmet taken off. Again, they're not super great for concealment, at least that's my headcanon. I know we can do stuff with it. But with this scout, I have him with his helmet off, and I got him shouting probably some orders. Of course, he needs a weapon, and I have one of these Lasguns that have a sling on it, and with a little bit of bending of the sling, I can get it on there and have his weapon shouldered, which is pretty cool. This kneeling guy I will have in a pointing pose, trying to mark a target or direct fire or what have you. And of course, while he's doing that, he's not firing his weapon, so I got him holding on to his carbine here. Now that we got this theme going with helmets being taken off, I got a couple of these spare helmets, and I'm going to fasten these to equipment to a couple of the models, either on backpacks or on the thighs. So they still have them if they get into direct confrontation or take artillery fire, but in their intended role, they're not supposed to be seen, so they aren't in their full combat gear, so to speak. I mean, their flak vests could also just be in their backpacks, I suppose, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. But we can suspend disbelief with that explanation anyway. And this guy, once again, not ready to fire his weapon, but I'm gonna put a set of binoculars in an open hand. They won't fit as if he's looking through them, but maybe he just took them down and he's preparing to communicate whatever he saw to his squad mates. And this guy will simply just have a carbine that he's carrying and a frag grenade that he's ready to throw. I'm limited by some of the bits here, and this is a set of classic Catachan bits, those two. They will be used again and again throughout the rest of this project. And here we have them with their heads on. Again, just plain heads without helmets. This one guy that's kneeling and pointing, I put a Genestealer Cult head on, as it looks like he has some cool goggles and radio communication equipment. And he's also getting a helmet fastened to his backpack to keep with the theme of the unit. And that more or less makes up the models of the squad. I'm still going to do some work on the metal models, which is coming up after this, but we got 10 bodies for the squad now, and I'm quite happy with the supporting cast to the snipers at this point. I'm going to strip the metal models of the existing paint. Not that there's anything wrong with the base colors, but I'm going to add some more bits to them to tie them into the rest of the squad. And as such, I will be priming them again. I could prime the bits, but when you're kitbashing, you're sort of jamming and you want the freedom to work with whatever bits fit in the spur of the moment and not having to plan it. So here they are stripped, and I want to add some backpacks to the snipers. I could potentially not do this, and also it looks a little bit weird on the cloak if you think about it, but try not to. And you could also argue that the other guys, not with the snipers, are just carrying the equipment for the snipers. But I want to have a theme going here, so that is why I'm doing it. Here's another one of those backpacks I turned upside down. Yeah, did not even consider it at the time. Nice one, Tom. Let's focus on one of these guys, the guy that's prone. This has always been a weird one because the original guy in the blister pack when I bought it came on a fantasy cavalry base. So it's always been awkward using a proper base for it, which is a 25mm base, but technically he came with the square base, so you could use it. My OCD, this mixing of square and round bases, nah, I'm not doing it. So I think the solution for this guy is to make the basing work with him, so it doesn't look weird that he's overhanging the base. So I'm going to be putting him on a rock or concrete surface, and to tie him into the rest of the squad, I'm also going to be using a backpack as a rest for his sniper rifle. That is a very legit thing to do. Fun trivia, he actually does have a rest. They actually all have bipods, but he also has a orc skull that he's using as a rest. In the context of the theme of this army with the Imperial Palace, I know demons don't really leave behind skeletons, so it's probably an abhuman mutant that's rotted away and he's using his skull, so like a mutated ogrin or something like that. Yeah, that's what we're going with. It's going to be mostly hidden anyway. There is also the option of using sandbags here, but I think the backpack is thematic to the unit, so that's what I'm going with. So I'm simply going to add some cork from this coaster, breaking it up and making it look like a piece of concrete or flat slate of rock that he's lying on. And that can extend comfortably over the lip of the base without it looking too weird. Time to glue these guys on slotted bases, and let's get on from there. The lieutenant/sergeant is wearing armor and he has some equipment on his back, so I can't really mount a backpack to him. So what I'll do instead is just add a couple of pouches on his chest to make him a little bit more tactical. I mean, he's a sergeant. Rank comes with privilege, and I'm sure he has some other guy carrying most of his stuff around anyway. And the plastic sniper we made, I'm just gonna add a couple of more pouches since she doesn't have a backpack, as the hood of the cloak sort of prevents that. And I'm also going to add a stowed helmet just to tie him in with the squad. And on with the backpacks for the snipers. Here we are pre-priming. I'm actually really happy with the state that these guys are in. I think I made them look quite uniform. I kept some trends with the helmets, the heads, the type of gear, and their backpacks as a common theme, and managed to tie together these disparate models and bits. At least I think so. I'm quite chuffed to get these primed and painted. I'm not going to go into too much depth with the painting of these guys. I'll focus on a couple of the relevant things as I go through the painting process. I think with a coat of priming, these guys really came together and look quite uniform. The primer is a army painter gray. I started off with the skin, and here I use a Bogman's Glow. It will eventually get washed with Carroburg Crimson, then highlighted with Elf Flesh, and then a little bit of Carroburg Crimson again. But later on I will be doing something else to the skin, which I will highlight when I get there. As I was painting the skin on some of the other guys in the squad, I noticed that the seam between the arm and the torso wasn't that great on some of the muscular guys. So I took a bit of liquid green stuff to try and mask that transition a little bit. It could have been more successful, but with some of the steps I do later on in painting, I think I managed to cover it okay. I would love to spend more time painting each guy, but this is a horde army and I will have to paint a lot of dudes to get them on the table. I might come back and fix some of those things later if they still bug me, but I think the result is pretty satisfying. It's honestly just mostly painting by the numbers at this point. I'm choosing that all the weapons are black, but I will do some camo on them. Like with a lot of real-world special operators or reconnaissance troops, they often get a bit of leeway to camouflage their weapons. So I've had these guys do the same thing to theirs. I still end up highlighting the metal with a very shiny silver to tie it into the army, but that's more of a style, so it doesn't look like I've neglected to highlight this squad, though I was thinking of keeping the metal dull on these guys on purpose, but I thought it would look like I was lazy with this squad if I didn't. For the clothes and the theme that I've gone with scavenged gear for the Force. Again, if you haven't checked out the first video, you might like that if you're still watching this one, so go take a look at that after this one. But simply just picking plausible camouflagey or military colors and painting on pieces of clothing, which is quite cool. And even though I made sure no two soldiers in this squad has the same exact uniform and combination of colors, they all sort of look cohesive. Their uniformity is their lack of uniformity in a way. It's kind of awesome how that works out. Here I decided to make these guys a little bit more practical in their role. This is 30k, some of them can be practical at this point. So I initially painted these guys Aquilas, gold, bronze, what have you. But I decided for his job as a reconnaissance sergeant, that would make him stand out. So I'm dulling this down in a matte green instead, so a camouflagey Aquila and trim on his armor. I'm still leaving the shiny Aquila on his cap, just because, you know, Imperium be dumb and all. But I tried to put in a little bit of common sense here. Maybe he did this after the fact, as that helped him survive. Maybe. And I did the same thing on some of the flasks here. I did leave all the belt buckles gold, so there is that. Now we get to the weapon camouflage. This is the first time I'm trying this on a scale model anyway. In real life, you would typically use like leaves or cloth or something as a stencil and then use a spray can that's with some heat resistant paint and some, yeah, you can go look it up if you're interested in that sort of stuff. But the way that I did it here, or I'm experimenting with it on this squad, is just to take a little bit of a frayed paintbrush and taking some of the classic camouflage colors, so green, brown, and black. Well, I don't need black on this weapon, but brown and green, and then just stippling it on in some tiger stripy patterns. And I think it worked out pretty well. I do a couple of variations on the different weapons. I do end up doing washes and weathering later on, so the effect is a lot more subtle in the end, and you could argue maybe a bit too subtle. So I could potentially go back and quote-unquote highlight the camouflage a little bit if I wanted to make it stand out. But for now, I'm happy with it. I'm not an expert at painting skin, especially Caucasian skin, so yeah, don't take my advice on too many things. But like I said, I'm highlighting the main muscle groups here with some Kislev or elf flesh, something like that, a lighter skin tone. And then to de-cartoonify it, I'm going back in with the same Carroburg Crimson to soften the transition between the muscle groups and from clothing to muscle and stuff like that. And it reads well on the table, at least I think so, but way better ways to paint skin, I think. I'm just not used to it, but I have to get used to it with this army. Anyway, that's a very long-winded segment into this next thing, which is I wanted to do something different. I wanted to keep the theme going with the camouflage. And before I get to that second layer of wash to tie it all together, I decided that these guys probably also camouflaged their skin, which would make a lot of sense. So I did more or less the same thing as I did with the weapons, except adding that black paint into the mix and doing some of these tiger stripe things, and for the face I do some lines under the eyes or what have you. So this is a test model that I did, and then I add the Carroburg Crimson to try and tie it all down. Now I will say the camouflage paint itself is on purpose not solid. I sort of watered it down and still used that frayed brush because I imagine a lot of this paint would have sweated off, rubbed off, or just wasn't an even coat to begin with. Some of it might even be mud that they smeared onto their skin like in Predator, and this is just their current state of camouflaginess. And also importantly, to leave some of the skin tone showing through beneath the paint so that it isn't just a black stripe or green stripe on his arm that you could mistake for clothing. And then, like I said, the wash on top to try and tie it all together. This is the first time I tried it, so I didn't know what to expect with it. But I liked the result, and I opted to do it for the rest of the squad and have that as a commonality as well. So in the heat of battle, if there are multiple squads next to each other, I can just look for body camouflage, backpacks, bear heads, camouflaged weapons. There should be a lot of indicators of which squad a Lasgun guy belongs to in this case. And lastly, like I do with all of my armies, is that I do a subtle dry brush of brown starting from the feet and fading out like a gradient as it goes up the body, just to tie it into the environment. It look like he's been there and not just a factory toy plopped onto a base. And off camera I go and do this to the guys that I forgot to do it to in the first video. And with that, I simply just have to paint the base rims and do the basing, which in my case is very simple, just some cork rocks and some Agrellan Badland texture paste to keep it as generic as possible so it will fit on as many battlefields and be immersive as I possibly can. And also it's so generic that if I ever want to add to it, I can go back and add tufts or more debris. I think these guys turned out really cool. I'm very happy with them. And as I was doing the bases on these guys, my girlfriend came by and said that these guys are the nicest guys that I have painted. She didn't mean the paint job. I have certainly done better paint jobs in the past, but she really liked the look of these guys. And whenever we do play video games, she also likes snipers, so I suppose that's part of it too. But yeah, I am really happy with these guys, and I think they will have some use case on the table, even if they are ballistic skill 3. But they are a troop choice, albeit a support squad. They do have scout, infiltrate, and move through cover, so I'm sure they'll be useful. And if they do get a lucky pin on a important unit or manage to take out a sergeant or apothecary, that would be cool too. But I'm not expecting much with these guys. I'm not expecting much with any militia stuff, which just means that whenever they do stuff, you're happy. In any case, I thought this was gonna be a short video, but turned out a lot longer than I thought it would. But I thought there was a lot of details in this project that I wanted to highlight. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to painting another 15 guys for my first infantry squad. That will be the basis of one of the next videos, which will be a lore video on how the Imperial Army is structured, how it acted during the Great Crusade, the expeditionary fleets, how the Solar Auxilia fits into it, planetary defense forces, and some Legion auxiliaries as well. So yeah, that will be one of the next videos coming up. Like I said, I need to paint 15 guys and finalize the script on the lore part of that. There's lore coming from quite a few books, but it has been exciting and motivating for me to do so. That was a very long-winded outro. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in some of the future videos, or check out some of my past videos. I also did this to my World Eater Space Marines, if you haven't seen that series yet, which is still ongoing. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Cheers.